Welcome to Boxing Predictions, where today we are talking the heavyweights. We're talking about the rankings here in January 2019. So if you've got any views on the rankings of the heavyweight division, jump down to the comment section below and let me know what you think. Who is number one? Who's number two? Who's number three? Now, have I omitted anyone from this top 10 that should have been in there? Let me know. But before I jump into the actual rankings, I just want to let you know that there is another video on the channel which is about whether we are currently in a golden age in the heavyweight division. Quite an interesting video. I enjoyed putting it together. So if you've got some spare time, jump across to the channel and let me know what you think about that video. So, rankings here, January 2019, the heavyweight division. Now, it has been a pretty interesting 12 months. You know, I think there's been maybe 5 brilliant fights in the heavyweight division in the last 12 months, which is more than what could be said in previous years. You know, usually there are decent fights. You know, there are some pretty brutal knockouts, but I believe in the last 12 months there has been some really, really great fights, you know, that have shown skill as well as heart. So let's talk about the top 10, the rankings that I believe currently is the case. So in number 10, I'm putting Dominic Breazeale, you know, former Olympian, former title challenger against Anthony Joshua. Now, he's got 20 wins with 18 knockouts, that one defeat against Anthony Joshua in the title challenge a couple of years ago. He fought just once in the last 12 months against Negron, and he got a really impressive stoppage. Now, there's something that I like about Breazeale, and it's just that he is gutsy, he's got heart, he's tough. We saw that against Ogano a couple of years ago. He just outmanned him. He outmanned him to win that fight, in a fight where I think most people have written him off. You know, and I think there is a future for Breazeale. You know, he is I think he's a mandatory challenger for Deontay Wilder, one of many mandatory challengers. Probably won't get that fight anytime soon, but I feel that Breazeale has a part to play in this top 10 situation heavyweight rankings. Right, so let's jump across to number 9. And number 9, I've gone for the undefeated Jarrell Miller. Now, some people will say that I probably should have put him higher. I'm sure there will be. But I've gone with him in 9th position. 23 victories with 20 stoppages. No defeats, 1 draw. So, in the last 12 months, he actually fought 3 times. Duhaupas, Adamek, and Dinu. Now, none of those 3 opponents are high-level opponents, but when you combine it with the previous 2 victories, Marius Wack, Washington, it puts together a body of work that is definitely improving. You know, these are people that are maybe top 30-ish, you know, and he's getting these wins. He's getting them fairly decisive, and he is, you know, he's moving up the rankings, but he needs to fight someone of, you know, substantial note, you know, because the fight against Adamek, I thought truly was an embarrassment. You know, a guy that once fought as low as I don't know Adamek fought down, maybe a super middleweight, maybe, you know, and Miller comes in at 310 pounds against him. You know, it is crazy. Adamek hasn't been of any note for a decade. Crazy that these fights are being made. The fact that you've got Eddie Hearn that's involved, they can't get someone, you know, of a decent level here in Europe to give him a good scrap, you know. So because of the opposition, that's why he sits in at 9th position. But realistically, the size of this guy is incredible. 319 pounds, I think, in his last fight. But he does not look fat, so to speak, which is pretty damn incredible. So 8th position, we move on to Joseph Parker. Now, Joseph Parker, 25 wins, 19 stoppages, 2 defeats. And both of those 2 defeats came in the last 12 months. First off, it was in a unification fight with Anthony Joshua where he lost the title, went to decision. You know, a lot of people thought that he wouldn't see the final belt, but he managed to tough it out, and he lost, you know, fairly convincingly to Anthony Joshua. He then came back and fought Dillian Whyte, and Dillian Whyte managed to beat him. But, you know, again, that was a brutally tough fight, and you know, a lot of people will tell you, had there been another 20, 30 seconds of that fight, Joseph Parker would have won, because Dillian Whyte was out on his feet. He could barely stand. And then Joseph Parker ended the year with a victory over Flores, pretty much as a comeback fight. But to be honest, he did not look brilliant. He showed glimpses of what he's all about, but the ending was controversial. There's debated low blows before getting the stoppage. Okay, I mean, Joseph Parker's someone who I really liked when he was coming up through the ranks. You know, before he started fighting fringe contenders, he showed speed, phenomenal jab, triple jab. He looked really, really exciting. But then as he progressed, happens to a lot of people, you know, his style seemed to change, and he was getting in too close, getting into too many wars against the likes of Takam, and he wasn't very impressive against Hughie Fury despite winning. And then when he comes up against, you know, the top guys, he has come up short. No surprise, even the fight against Andy Ruiz was not impressed with that performance. But despite that, I'm sticking him in the 8th because, you know, he has got this experience, 4 world title fights. I think he can come again. Whether he can win a title, I do not know. So 7th place is probably my most controversial selection, and that's Kubrat Pulev. A lot of people would tell me there's no way this guy should be in the top 10. 26 wins, only 13 of them as a stoppage, and 1 defeat against the great Wladimir Klitschko. Now, in the last 12 months, he fought just once, and that was against Hughie Fury. And that was an interesting fight because Hughie Fury got injured, facial injury, quite early on, and realistically, that dictated the fight. Now, as the fight continued, Pulev won fairly convincingly, but Hughie Fury was unable to fight the game plan and do what he wanted to do because of the significant injury. Now, I put him there because I've always liked Pulev. I like what he has to offer. I think he's highly skilled. He has good movement, good shot selection. It's just that his opponents and his record is not great. Now, we know that he was meant to fight Anthony Joshua. He pulled out through injury in step Carlos Takam. And it seems to be that he's just been thrown to the back of the queue. And the fact that he ended up fighting Hughie Fury just shows you where he is. Now, even now, having beaten Hughie Fury, no one's talking about Pulev. I believe that he is one of many mandatory challengers to one of many belts. But whether he will get that shot, I think it's unlikely. And I think in terms of world title contention, it's probably all over for Pulev. I don't think he'll get a chance unless it is forced upon Anthony Joshua later in the year. I mean, he could step in and have this April fight. Who knows? But I say we'll leave Pulev as 7th because he has a decent record. He's a great fighter. He just needs this big fight. Now, jumping in 6th position, we've got Alexander Povetkin, one of my favourite fighters of the last decade in the heavyweight division. 34 wins, 24 knockouts with 2 defeats. Now, he fought twice in the last year. First of all, it was against David Price in an interesting fight where David Price, he hurt him. He hurt him, and all the Price believers and fans were thinking, this is the time. David Price, he's going to get a big win, and then potentially he's going to get this world title shot. Didn't happen. Povetkin came back and got the win. And then, obviously, got the Anthony Joshua fight, where Anthony Joshua stopped him. A lot of people thought that Povetkin could be one of the few people that had the skill set, the tools, and the heart to actually really do something against Anthony Joshua. I was one of the people that actually questioned that. I thought that he would have the ability to just rough up Joshua, but also have the elegance and skill to outbox him. But that wasn't the case, and Anthony Joshua actually got a very good stoppage in that fight. So now we move on to the top 5. There will be debate here, I'm sure. Now, first off, the 5th position, I've gone with Ortiz. 30 wins, 26 stoppages, 1 defeat. So in the last 12 months, he fought 3 times. He fought in his first legitimate world title fight against Deontay Wilder, which was one of the great fights of the year. One of the true great fights, I think, of any division. It was a fight that I thoroughly enjoyed. Multiple knockdowns and a stoppage. Heart by both people. And for me, Ortiz has always been one of the people that I've questioned. A lot of time he's been in the top 3, top 4s, for the last couple of years without really deserving it, without, earning this prestige of being, in the top, top 10 contenders, being a fighter that was being classified as being avoided, being the best non-champion. But this was the fight that he earned my respect. He lost, but he showed that he could hurt Deontay Wilder. He showed skill, and he posed a lot of questions for Deontay Wilder that Deontay Wilder just didn't have the answers. And because of that, I was thoroughly impressed. And realistically, it was the first time that I've been impressed with Ortiz. He had some stinky fights in the last, the previous year or so. Horrific. When people were telling me, they were saying Ortiz is the real deal, and he was putting in horrific performances. Some people would say it's the opposition, but there you go. Now, you've had 2 other fights, Cajano and Kaufman, which he won. Cajano, he knocked out relative ease. Now, Cajano I have a problem with because Cajano was one of Joseph Parker's defences, and it went the distance, which is where you have to question Joseph Parker's ability of whether he could ever be a top fighter. Is that fight, or you have to say that fight was a fix to allow Cajano to go the full distance. I'm just putting that out there. But anyway, Ortiz goes in 5th. I think he has a lot to say. I don't know whether he'll get Joshua, Wilder, Fury again, but he has he can be part of the next level, letting other people have opportunities or stopping people have opportunities. So now we move into 4th place, and I've gone for Dillian Whyte in 4th place. 25 wins, 18 stoppages, and 1 defeat. That 1 defeat coming against Anthony Joshua a couple of years ago in an interesting fight when they were both a little less experienced. Now, Whyte's probably had one of the most interesting years of any heavyweight currently. Going there, he fought Lucas Browne, Joseph Parker, and Derek Chisora. And he stopped Browne, which was pretty impressive, although Browne is someone that, whilst I picked him to win that title when he beat Chagiev, he's not a particularly elegant or skillful operator, and he would struggle against pretty much everyone in this top 10. So it wasn't a surprise to me that Whyte would win that fight. The Parker fight shows to me some of the problems that Dillian Whyte has. Dillian Whyte has some skills. He has a decent skill set. He has decent power. He has decent size. But he gets pulled into fights. And we saw that in the very first Chisora fight. Realistically, he should have been outboxing Chisora, keeping him on the outside and winning it with ease. But it turned into an absolute war. And we kind of saw similar periods of action in this Parker fight. And whilst he outboxed Parker generally, you know, we got to the ending, and had there been another 20 seconds, Parker probably would have stopped Dillian Whyte there. So for me, I thought it was disappointing that there wasn't a rematch. I would have liked to have seen a rematch, Parker versus Whyte. You know, possibly it's something that can happen down the line. But then we ended the year with a rematch, Dillian Whyte versus Derek Chisora. We knew from the first fight it was going to be explosive. And, you know, this fight, it didn't disappoint. It really was a great, fun fight. It lacked elegance, it lacked skill, it lacked technique, but it was a really exciting one. And, you know, Chisora again exposed problems with Dillian Whyte. You know, the problem is that what Derek Chisora exposed in Dillian Whyte, he's not going to face in anyone else. No one else, with maybe the exception of shades of what Joseph Parker do, no one else in the heavyweight division is going to do what Derek Chisora did, you know. So it was an interesting fight. Derek Chisora, despite his style, and the thing with Derek Chisora is that most of the time he doesn't get the rub of the green. He doesn't get decisions, you know. For what he does is fairly messy and whatever, and he gets bad decisions. We've seen it over and over again. But in this fight, when the fight was stopped, he was winning the fight, despite having 2 points deducted, which is incredible. But Dillian Whyte came up with a brutal knockout. And, you know, if someone wins with a decisive knockout, you have to just accept it and say, you know, this guy's dangerous. So, we move on to the top three. It will be no surprise who's in the top three. But this is my position. This is my opinion of where I see the top three. Okay, so the top three, position 3, Tyson Fury, 27 wins with 19 knockouts, no defeats, 1 draw. He fought 3 times, 2 warm-up fights against Safari, complete waste of time. Pianetta, where he just played with him, and then we had the big one against Deontay Wilder. Now, this has to go down as possibly the best fight of any division in 2018. We saw skill, we saw movement, we saw power, we saw passion, we saw heart, we saw courage, we saw entertainment. This had literally everything. It had the story, it had everything. And we saw Tyson Fury in some ways outboxed. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Deontay Wilder fans will say, you look at the stats, there really isn't much in it. In punches landed, punches thrown, it's fairly close. But by watching the fight and watching what actually happened and who was in control, Tyson Fury was in control of that fight for, you know, 95% of that fight. But he was knocked down in a fairly, you know, flash knockdown. He got up. But then that knockdown at the end, I can't think of another knockdown in a fight. People will tell me otherwise. I can't remember another fight where someone was knocked down as heavily and as brutal as that and managed to get up in an instant and shake off what had happened so quickly and have such agile movement to continue the round and win the rest of the round and win the next round. I just don't remember seeing anyone get down from such a heavy knockdown like it. It was remarkable. Now, it could be just a one-off, but that was probably the moment of 2018 in boxing. That second where Tyson Fury is laying on the canvas, he looks out cold. He then opens his eyes and he gets up so quickly, jumps on his feet, he's ready to go. Absolutely phenomenal from the guy. But purely because of where he is this year and the fact that he didn't get the win in the only fight of relevance, he has to stay in position 3. So we move on to number 2, and I've gone for Deontay Wilder. 40 wins, 39 stoppages, no defeats in the draw against Fury. Now Wilder, he had an interesting year. You know, he also fought the Ortiz, which we've also spoke about. 2 great fights. 2 of the great fights of the year, particularly in the heavyweight division. But, you know, Wilder, you know, he's got these 9 world title fights. He's been a champion for a long time. You know, he's finally stepping up and fighting great opposition. He has to be in position 2 for me. Just there. Because he does not have the super win that Anthony Joshua has. And the fact that he's continued to be active. So as I say, moving on, I've pre-said it, but number 1 position, Anthony Joshua, 22 wins, 21 knockouts, no defeats. This year he fought Joseph Parker and Povetkin. Parker took him the full duration, which was really interesting. So we start with, as always, we're learning more and more against Anthony Joshua, and he managed to get the stoppage against Povetkin. You know, so Anthony Joshua for me is at the top of the tree. There isn't really much more we can say. So that was the top 10: Brazil, Miller, Parker, Pulev, Povetkin, Ortiz, Whyte, Fury, Wilder and Joshua. You know, people that are outside of the 10, people like Kaunaki, Jennings, even Chisora, maybe Hughie, Fury, you know, they will have a question, they will have an influence on what happens, possibly. We've also got this really weird situation where Manuel Charr is the WBA champion and Trevor Bryan is the interim champion of this WBA, which, you know, where Joshua is the champion. It's ridiculous. But anyway, the wild card here is Alexander Usyk, you know, the undisputed cruiserweight champion, possibly the pound for pound best fighter on the planet. He might have a say in this heavyweight division. But what I'm also interested to see over the next 12 months is how some of these less experienced guys like Joe Joyce, Hrgovic, Dubois, Gorman, Tanioka, you know, how they progress, whether they have any impact on the top 10 in the next 12 months or whether they don't. You know, I mean, they're all talking about Joe Joyce. You know, David Hay was saying we're pushing him as fast as we can. Blah blah blah. So it's possible that these guys could impact the top 10. We'll see. Now, at this point in time, there's no scheduled fights for the heavyweight division in 2019, which of any note, which I find pretty incredible. All we really know is that Anthony Joshua's going to be fighting in April, currently scheduled for Wembley. But if they can't get a decent opponent, it probably isn't going to be there. Now, as we said, you've got... it's probably going to be Dillian Whyte. I mean, it could be Alexander Usyk. I doubt it. It could be Pulev. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if that comes out of the woodwork and we see Pulev versus Anthony Joshua. But I think it's probably going to be Dillian Whyte, and I really want to see Wilder versus Fury. I mean, it's the fight that I want to see more than anything. I don't want to see Anthony Joshua, you know, getting involved in this. Let's see the Wilder Fury rematch. It's what everyone wants to see. And to be fair, I mean, I wouldn't mind it being a trilogy. I would not mind it being a trilogy and seeing 2 Wilder Fury fights in 2019, whatever happens. Whether Fury, you know, outboxes him and wins on points, or whether Wilder ices Fury in a round. I'd love to see a third one, to see a trilogy. I think Anthony Joshua, he'd probably fight Wyatt, he could fight Pulev, and he could fight Alexander Usyk in 2019. That could be his schedule for the year. But the rest of them, it's really, you know, we don't know what's going to happen. Lot of politics in the heavyweight division, a lot of politics. You know, a lot of people have got these mandatory positions which mean absolutely nothing, which is ridiculous. The major problem here is that with Anthony Joshua holding so many of the titles, if they were more spread about, we'd probably see more interesting fights. People would be more prepared to fight. But knowing that they would need to fight a Gerald Miller or a Luis Ortiz to potentially consolidate their position as a mandatory challenger. People don't want to do that, you know, and it's no surprise, you know. So 2019, I think, will be an interesting year in the boxing. I think we're going to have a couple of super fights. It'll be interesting to see whether Anthony Joshua is still the champion come the end of this year. I think that's the biggest question. And the biggest question will be answered on whether he fights someone of note. If he doesn't, he will continue to be the champion. He will continue to hold those titles. So the other question is, can Tyson Fury do the full Rocky story and come back and win his titles? We will see. Been boxing predictions. We'll see you in another video. We'll see if there's some actual predictions throughout the year. If you've got any comments, jump down and let me know. Let me know what your rankings were. And also check out my video on whether this is the golden age of the heavyweight division. This has been Boxing Predictions. We'll see you soon.